The grand mansion stood tall, gleaming under the soft evening lights, its marble floors polished to perfection. Inside, laughter and soft chatter floated through the vast hallways. A small gathering had been arranged in honor of a wealthy young girl's birthday, and the guests were all people of high society, people who were used to being admired and showing off their status. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their lights reflecting like tiny stars on the walls. Expensive paintings lined the hall, each telling stories of wealth, power, and prestige. In the middle of this extravagance sat a grand piano. Its polished black surface shone under the chandelier lights, and the ivory keys seemed to almost sparkle. Everyone in the room had noticed it, though most of the guests barely dared touch it. Music was considered a mark of sophistication in this circle, and no one wanted to risk showing they were not skilled enough. The young girl herself was standing beside the piano, dressed in a flowing gown that shimmered like silk, her posture perfect, her expression one of composed confidence. She was used to being admired, and tonight all eyes were on her. No one noticed the janitor at first. He entered quietly, pushing a cleaning cart with a soft squeak of its wheels against the marble floor. His uniform was plain and simple, nothing like the fine clothes everyone wore. His hands were slightly rough from work, and his movements were careful as he maneuvered around the legs of the furniture. He paused for a moment, as if unsure whether he should continue or quietly leave. His eyes, however, were drawn to the piano. There was something about it that spoke to him, something familiar and comforting. Music had always been his companion, even if only in small moments stolen in silence. He loved the piano, not as a symbol of wealth or status, but as a tool for expression, a way to speak when words failed. He remembered the old piano at the community center where he had grown up, how the keys would hum under his fingers, and how the music seemed to carry him away from the struggles of everyday life. Tonight, in this luxurious hall, the same feeling returned. He hesitated, glancing around. Some guests were whispering to each other, their eyes briefly flicking toward him with curiosity, amusement, or perhaps judgment. A few smirked, imagining what it would be like if a janitor tried to play such a magnificent piano. Others barely noticed him, absorbed in their conversations and pretentious laughter. The young girl, however, noticed. Her curiosity was piqued, and something about the quiet way he moved, the way he seemed drawn to the piano, caught her attention. She did not approach him immediately. Instead, she watched, her arms crossed lightly, an unreadable expression on her face. There was no mockery, no scorn, only curiosity, a small flicker of interest that made her lean slightly closer to the piano, as if she were waiting to see what he would do. The janitor took a deep breath. He knew everyone's eyes were on him now. It was not just the wealthy girl, but others in the room too. He felt the weight of judgment pressing down on him, yet he could not resist the pull of the piano. His hands hovered above the keys, trembling slightly, though not from fear, more from anticipation. From the excitement of being near the instrument again after so long, the room went quieter, almost imperceptibly. Conversations faded, replaced by the soft echo of curiosity. The wealthy girl stepped closer, her gaze steady. There was something about her presence that was not threatening, not mocking. She seemed genuinely interested, though no one else could tell why. The guests, however, began to lean in slightly, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. They did not know what to expect, and that uncertainty created a mix of excitement and tension in the air. The janitor finally let his fingers touch the keys. The first note was soft, almost hesitant, but it resonated beautifully through the hall. Heads turned and whispers began to rise among the guests. Some tried to stifle their reactions, others stared, unable to look away. The wealthy girl's eyes widened slightly as she stepped even closer, her curiosity growing. The janitor's hands moved with a quiet confidence now, a gentle rhythm forming as he continued to play. The music was simple at first, familiar but full of emotion, the kind that could make even the most composed listener pause. It was not just skill that held the room in suspense, but honesty, authenticity. There was no attempt to impress, no desire to compete with the guests or the grandness around him. The music came from a place deep within him, a place untouched by wealth, status, or expectation. It spoke of a life of hard work, quiet struggles, and moments of hidden joy. It was raw, human, and beautiful. The wealthy girl felt a strange pull in her chest. She had seen many people play the piano, many who were trained and polished, yet none had ever made her feel the way this music did. It was as if the room had shifted, the barriers of wealth and status melting away with each note. She realized that she had been watching not just a janitor, but someone who had poured his heart into every key he touched. The guests began to notice the change too. Some frowned, unsure whether to applaud or remain silent. Others exchanged glances, whispering to each other about how surprising this was. A few even felt embarrassed at their initial assumptions. The janitor, however, continued without noticing them, completely absorbed in the music. Time seemed to stretch, each note lingering in the air, carrying with it a story, a memory, a feeling that no words could capture. As he played, the young girl took a step closer still, her initial curiosity now mingled with awe. She had expected a mistake, a faltering note that would confirm the assumptions of the guests. But there was none. Every note was intentional, every movement of his hands precise yet free, alive. She realized that she was witnessing something extraordinary, something far beyond appearances or social expectations. The janitor's music began to change subtly. It grew more expressive, more complex, weaving a tapestry of sound that held everyone in its grasp. Some guests tried to hide their amazement, others were unable to resist the beauty, letting themselves be carried along by the melody. The wealthy girl's expression softened, her posture relaxing as she allowed herself to be fully present in the moment. For the first time that evening, the room felt less like a display of wealth and more like a gathering of people sharing in something real and human. The first part of this story ends, with the janitor's final note lingering in the air. A hush falls over the room. No one speaks. Even the wealthy girl, who was always so poised and confident, feels a rare sense of humility. The janitor, sensing the attention, slowly lifts his hands from the keys. He does not bow, he does not announce his skill. He simply sits there for a moment, letting the music breathe, letting the silence speak for itself. The guests are stunned. Some can barely believe what they have just witnessed. The wealthy girl, however, steps forward, her eyes bright, her voice steady but filled with genuine admiration. She acknowledges his talent in a way that surprises everyone, not with arrogance or superiority, but with respect and warmth. The janitor smiles quietly, a soft, humble smile that speaks of gratitude and quiet pride. At that moment, something unspoken passes between them. A connection, not of wealth or status, but of shared humanity and understanding. The music, the courage to play, and the honesty of expression have bridged a gap that no words could have. It is a moment that none of the guests will ever forget, and one that will quietly change the way the young girl sees the world, herself, and the people around her. And so, the first chapter of this encounter closes, leaving the audience eager to see what happens next, how the wealthy girl will respond, how the guests will react, and what impact this simple yet profound act of music will have on everyone present. The room was still for a moment after the janitor's last note faded into silence. Everyone felt the weight of what had just happened, though no one quite knew how to respond. Some guests shifted in their seats, trying to mask their surprise, while others simply stared at the piano, unable to believe what they had seen. The wealthy girl, who had been watching him closely, felt a strange mix of curiosity and admiration. She could sense there was more to this man than anyone realized. She stepped closer to the piano, her gown swishing lightly across the polished floor. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment there was no distinction between social status, wealth, or position. All that existed was the music they had just shared, and the quiet understanding that came with it. She spoke softly, her voice steady but kind. "That was beautiful," she said, her words carrying genuine awe. It was the first time anyone in that room had heard her speak with humility rather than pride. The janitor blinked in surprise. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Usually he was ignored, overlooked, or treated as invisible. Even the few kind words he sometimes received were shallow, said out of obligation rather than true feeling. But her voice sounded different. It carried sincerity, and it reached him in a way that made him feel seen. For a moment, he wondered if he should say something, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded politely, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Around them, the guests began to stir. Some clapped awkwardly, not wanting to seem rude, but others hesitated, unsure how to react. There were murmurs, whispers about the unexpected talent, and a few pointed looks exchanged in disbelief. The room was filled with a mix of awe, confusion, and curiosity. Some were embarrassed that they had judged him so quickly, assuming he could never play something so magnificent. Others were curious to know how he had learned to play so well, yet they dared not ask. The wealthy girl continued to watch him, noticing the calm humility in his posture, the quiet confidence in his eyes. She realized that this man, who worked quietly behind the scenes, doing what most people ignored or dismissed, had a depth that few could understand. There was a story behind his talent, a life that had shaped him in ways that wealth and luxury could never touch. She felt an unexpected pull to learn more about him, to understand the person behind the music. "You've had a lot of practice, haven't you?" she asked gently, her curiosity sincere. It was not a question meant to embarrass or challenge him, but a genuine attempt to connect. The janitor looked at her, surprised by the interest in her tone. Most people never asked about his life. They simply assumed they knew it. Yet here was someone asking with real intent, as if she wanted to understand him. He took a deep breath and replied quietly, "Yes, I've always loved music. It's been with me for as long as I can remember. I've had to work hard for everything else, but music has always been my escape." His words were simple, but they carried weight, a raw honesty that resonated in the room. Even some of the wealthiest guests paused, realizing that talent and passion could exist anywhere, not just in the privileged circles they were accustomed to. The wealthy girl nodded, absorbing his words. She felt a sense of respect growing inside her, a recognition that true skill and dedication were far more valuable than wealth or status. Her eyes softened, and for the first time that evening, she spoke without the usual formality that marked her interactions with guests. "It's incredible to see someone so dedicated. I underestimated you," she admitted, her voice quiet but sincere. Her confession hung in the air, unexpected but refreshing in its honesty. The janitor's expression remained calm, yet a subtle warmth appeared in his eyes. He was not used to people admitting their mistakes, much less in such a genuine way. He had faced judgment and condescension countless times, yet here was someone who saw his talent and acknowledged it openly. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than words could convey. Around them, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. The tension that had filled the space moments ago was melting away, replaced by curiosity and admiration. Some guests leaned closer to hear their conversation, while others quietly reflected on their own assumptions. For the first time that evening, social barriers seemed less important, and the focus was on something deeper, a shared human experience, a moment of connection that transcended wealth, status, or appearance. The wealthy girl's eyes lingered on the piano, and she realized that she wanted to hear more. She didn't want to simply applaud the janitor's skill and move on. She wanted to understand it, to experience it again. She leaned slightly closer and asked, "Would you play something for us again?" "Something your own choice?" There was no challenge in her voice, no hint of superiority, only genuine curiosity and respect. The janitor hesitated for a brief moment, then nodded. He positioned his hands over the keys once more, his fingers hovering before pressing down gently. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, as if he were testing the room, gauging the audience. But soon the music began to flow, steady and confident, carrying emotion that was raw and pure. The melody was different this time, more personal, more expressive, as if he were sharing a piece of his soul with everyone present. The wealthy girl closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over her. She felt her own emotions stirring, memories, long-forgotten feelings, and a sense of wonder that she rarely experienced in her privileged life. The guests were equally captivated. Some sat in stunned silence, unable to look away. Others whispered softly to one another, acknowledging the unexpected talent with admiration and disbelief. The room was no longer about appearances or social status. It was about music, emotion, and the quiet power of genuine expression. As the janitor played, he allowed himself to be fully present. Each note carried meaning, each pause intentional. He was not performing for applause or recognition. He was sharing a part of himself, and that honesty resonated with everyone. The wealthy girl, still standing near the piano, felt a growing admiration, not just for his skill, but for the humility and authenticity he displayed. She realized that true greatness was not measured by titles or wealth, but by dedication, passion, and the ability to touch others with what you love. The music continued for several minutes, filling every corner of the hall. The guests began to feel a mix of emotions: wonder, awe, humility. They could not deny the beauty of what they were hearing, even if it challenged their preconceived notions of talent and status. Some even felt a pang of embarrassment for their earlier assumptions, realizing how unfairly they had judged someone simply because of his occupation. When the final note faded, the room fell silent once again. It was not the same silence as before. This one was filled with reverence and contemplation. The wealthy girl opened her eyes, her gaze meeting the janitor's. She smiled, a small but genuine gesture that spoke volumes. "Thank you," she said simply, and the words felt weighty, carrying appreciation beyond mere courtesy. The janitor inclined his head slightly, a quiet acknowledgement of her respect. He had not sought recognition, yet here it was given freely, sincerely. The moment had transformed both of them in subtle ways. The wealthy girl had been reminded that humility and curiosity could open doors to experiences she had never imagined. The janitor had been reminded that talent and passion, when shared honestly, could touch hearts in ways he had long forgotten. The guests slowly began to clap, some hesitantly, others with wholehearted appreciation. The wealthy girl's applause was the loudest, most genuine, yet it was never meant to overshadow the music itself. It was an acknowledgement of the person behind the talent, the human being who had shared something beautiful without asking for anything in return. In the quiet aftermath, conversations began to flow once more, but they were different now. People spoke with newfound respect, sharing thoughts about the music, the courage it took to play, and the lesson in humility that had just unfolded before them. The janitor quietly returned to his cart, continuing his work as if nothing extraordinary had happened, yet there was a subtle shift in the room. Everyone had seen something that evening that went beyond appearances, beyond status, beyond expectation. The wealthy girl lingered for a moment, watching him work. She felt a sense of admiration, but also a sense of reflection. She realized that she had much to learn, not about music, but about life, about seeing people for who they truly are rather than what they appear to be. She took a deep breath, her heart full of gratitude for this unexpected encounter. And she knew that the memory of this evening would stay with her for a long time. As part 2 comes to a close, the room buzzed quietly with conversation, but the memory of the music and the humanity it revealed lingered in every corner. The wealthy girl and the janitor had shared a connection that could not be measured by wealth, status, or privilege. It was a simple, human connection, one built on honesty, respect, and the universal language of music. And though the night would continue, that moment would remain, a quiet reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary experiences come from the most unexpected place. The room still hummed with quiet energy after the janitor's second performance. Everyone had felt the music, and though some tried to act casual, they couldn't hide their astonishment. Even the most confident guests, used to being the center of attention, seemed subdued. The wealthy girl stood near the piano, her eyes following the janitor as he continued his work quietly, moving with calm precision. She felt a growing sense of admiration and curiosity, wondering how someone so humble could possess such remarkable talent. A few guests began to exchange glances, whispering under their breath. Some could not hide the disbelief in their eyes. Who knew a janitor could play like that? One murmured softly, almost afraid to voice it too loudly. Another shook their head, still trying to reconcile what they had just seen. Most of the room, however, remained silent, unsure of how to respond. They had attended the gathering expecting elegance. Music that was rehearsed and polished, perhaps a little showiness. But nothing like this, nothing that felt so real. So heartfelt, the wealthy girl leaned slightly toward the piano, unable to resist the pull of curiosity. "Would you show us more?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with genuine interest. There was no teasing or challenge in her tone. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or prove a point. She simply wanted to experience more of the music. Her request was soft, almost shy, yet firm enough that it carried an unspoken encouragement. The janitor paused for a moment, looking up at her. There was a quiet understanding in his eyes. He could have refused, kept his work separate from the gathering, and returned to cleaning without drawing more attention. But something in her voice, in the way she looked at him without judgment, made him nod gently. "All right," he said, and moved closer to the piano. The guests leaned forward slightly. Sensing that something remarkable was about to unfold, he placed his hands over the keys once again. This time, the music began slowly, almost like a story being told in whispers. It was different from before, more deliberate, more expressive. His fingers moved with a confidence that seemed effortless, each note flowing into the next, creating a melody that filled the hall with warmth and emotion. The music seemed to breathe life into the room, capturing the attention of everyone present. The wealthy girl closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. It was not just beautiful, it was moving. Every note carried emotion, telling stories of struggle, hope, and quiet resilience. She felt her own heart respond, a flutter of empathy and understanding she had never expected to feel in such a formal setting. The janitor's music was not about showing off skill or impressing anyone. It was about sharing a part of himself, and that honesty made it unforgettable. Some guests tried to hide their reactions, but they couldn't. A few had tears welling up, touched by the raw beauty of the performance. Others looked at the janitor with a newfound respect, their earlier assumptions crumbling. They had seen a man they thought of as ordinary, a background figure in their world of privilege, and discovered someone extraordinary. The contrast was so stark that it left them silent, almost guilty for having judged him so quickly. The janitor's hands moved faster now, yet the music remained controlled, never hurried. There was an intensity in the way he played, a passion that seemed to flow directly from his soul. The wealthy girl watched, fascinated, as he shifted seamlessly between soft, delicate passages and powerful, commanding chords. The room was no longer a gathering of high society guests. It had become a theater of emotion, each person caught in the spell of the music. A hush fell over the room as the janitor moved into a particularly complex section. Every finger was precise yet full of life. The wealthy girl felt her own breathing slow as she absorbed each note, each crescendo, each pause that spoke as loudly as the music itself. She realized she was witnessing someone whose talent had been cultivated in silence, away from recognition or applause, and it made her respect him even more. He had worked for this quietly, patiently, and now he shared it effortlessly. Some of the guests, still trying to maintain their composure, exchanged nervous glances. They had assumed this would be light entertainment, perhaps a brief performance before polite applause. But the janitor was doing something different, something profound. He wasn't performing for them. He was performing for the music, for himself, and in doing so, he was touching everyone in the room. The wealthy girl noticed this too. She could feel the authenticity radiating from him, and it left her both humbled and inspired. Minutes passed, though it felt longer to everyone listening. The music carried them through a journey of emotion, highs and lows, soft whispers and bold declarations, all without a single word. The wealthy girl's eyes opened slightly, and she looked at him again. She could see the focus in his expression, the care in every movement. There was no pretense, no desire to show off, only an honest connection to the music itself. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced before. As the final notes approached, the room seemed to hold its breath. The janitor's fingers glided over the keys with a delicate intensity, the music slowing, softening, and fading into a gentle silence. When the last note lingered and finally dissolved, a moment of stillness remained, as if the room itself were trying to process what had just happened. The wealthy girl's hand instinctively moved to her chest, her heart beating quickly, overwhelmed by the depth of the performance. Then almost simultaneously, applause erupted. It started softly, but quickly grew louder as everyone realized they could no longer contain their admiration. Some clapped with tears in their eyes, others with smiles of amazement. The wealthy girl's applause was the most heartfelt, standing apart from the rest. She looked at the janitor and spoke, her voice filled with awe. "You have an incredible gift." "That was more than beautiful. It was extraordinary." The janitor inclined his head slightly, a quiet acknowledgement. He had not expected such recognition, nor did he seek it. He was not performing for accolades, yet the genuine admiration in her voice touched him deeply. He felt seen, understood, and respected in a way he rarely experienced. For a brief moment, the barriers of class, status, and expectation disappeared. All that mattered was the connection forged through music. The guests, still applauding, began to murmur amongst themselves. Some expressed regret at their earlier judgment, others marveled at the unexpected talent in someone they had overlooked. The wealthy girl, however, remained focused on the janitor, her mind buzzing with questions she wanted to ask, thoughts she wanted to share. She realized this encounter had opened her eyes, not just to his talent, but to the importance of seeing people for who they truly were. Beyond appearances, the janitor slowly stepped back from the piano, returning to his cart, but the shift in the room was undeniable. He moved with his usual quiet dignity, but the atmosphere around him had changed. Where there had once been doubt and dismissal, now there was respect and admiration. The wealthy girl followed him with her eyes, feeling a mix of humility and inspiration. She knew that this experience would stay with her long after the gathering ended. Some guests began to approach the janitor, asking questions about his music, wanting to know how he learned, where he practiced, and how long it had taken him to develop such skill. He answered each question politely, never boasting, never seeking to impress further. His humility only deepened the respect everyone felt for him. The wealthy girl listened silently, smiling quietly, her admiration growing. She realized that talent paired with humility and dedication was more powerful than any display of wealth or privilege. The music had transformed the evening. What had begun as a typical gathering of high society guests had become a memorable event, a lesson in humanity and the quiet strength of those often overlooked. The wealthy girl reflected on her own behavior, recognizing moments when she had judged others too quickly, allowed appearances to cloud her perception, or assumed superiority. She resolved to carry the humility she had learned tonight into her daily life. Inspired by the janitor's example, as the room slowly returned to normal, the janitor continued his work quietly, moving through the hall with the same care and dedication as always. Yet there was a new energy surrounding him, an unspoken recognition of the extraordinary skill and character he possessed. The wealthy girl watched him for a moment longer, a sense of gratitude and respect lingering in her heart. She knew that this evening and this music had changed something fundamental, not just in her, but in everyone who had witnessed it. Part 3 closes with the understanding that this was more than a performance. It was a moment of connection, a demonstration of how talent, humility, and honesty could leave a lasting impression on anyone, regardless of social standing. The janitor had shown that true greatness is not measured by wealth or status, but by the depth of one's dedication, the authenticity of one's expression, and the courage to share one's passion with the world. The room was still buzzing with excitement and disbelief after the janitor's extraordinary performance. Even as he moved quietly through the hall, tending to his cleaning duties, the energy of what had just happened lingered. Guests whispered to one another, their expressions a mix of admiration, shock, and a little embarrassment. They had all assumed they knew what to expect from the evening, but what they had just witnessed had shattered their expectations completely. The wealthy girl stood near the piano, her eyes fixed on the janitor. There was something different about the way she looked at him now, no longer with curiosity or polite interest, but with genuine respect and awe. She had always been confident in her social circle, used to being admired and admired in return. Yet this moment had humbled her in a way that few things ever had. The talent she had just seen, the honesty with which it had been shared, made her reflect on her own life and how she had treated others. She took a deep breath, stepping closer to the janitor. Her voice was soft, yet clear enough for him to hear. You didn't just play the piano," she said. "You told a story. You shared a part of yourself with us, and it's something none of us will forget." Her words were sincere, free from any hint of superiority or judgment. The janitor paused, touched by her acknowledgment, though he did not stop working. He gave a small nod, a simple gesture of humility, but the way his eyes met hers conveyed gratitude and quiet pride. Some guests, unable to contain their admiration any longer, began to approach him cautiously. They asked questions about how he had learned to play, where he had practiced, and how long he had been playing. The janitor answered each question politely, never boasting, never drawing attention to himself. Each response was humble, measured, and genuine, and it only increased the respect people felt for him. The wealthy girl watched all this with fascination. She realized that this man had lived a life that required both discipline and resilience, qualities that she admired deeply. A few of the more skeptical guests, however, still seemed reluctant to accept what they had seen. They whispered to one another, questioning how someone in such a humble position could possess such talent. Yet even their doubts were softened by the undeniable skill and emotion that the janitor had displayed. It was impossible to ignore or dismiss. The performance had left a permanent mark, a memory that would not fade. The wealthy girl moved a little closer to the piano again, feeling a desire to hear more, to experience the depth of his music once again. "Could you play one more piece?" she asked, her voice gentle but insistent. There was no pressure in her tone, only a heartfelt request. She wanted to understand him better, to see what else he could create with his hands and heart. The janitor hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He could have refused, continued his work, and let the evening move on. But something in her eyes encouraged him to continue. He sat down at the piano once more, adjusting his posture slightly. His hands hovered over the keys, and then he began to play. This time the music was different. It was richer, more complex, filled with emotion that seemed to pour from his very soul. The wealthy girl closed her eyes, letting the music envelop her. Each note seemed to carry a story, a memory, or a feeling. She felt a deep connection to the music, as if it were speaking directly to her heart. It was not just skill that impressed her, but the honesty and vulnerability in each note. The janitor was not performing for applause or recognition. He was expressing himself, and the authenticity of that expression touched everyone in the room. Guests who had been skeptical moments ago were now captivated. They listened in silence, fully absorbed in the performance. Some had tears in their eyes. Others felt a sense of awe that was hard to describe. The wealthy girl noticed the subtle ways in which the janitor's music affected each person, the quiet gasps, the soft smiles, the reflective expressions. It was a reminder that true art had the power to reach everyone, regardless of their background or status. As the piece continued, the wealthy girl opened her eyes slightly and watched him play. She noticed the precision in his fingers, the fluidity of his movements, and the intensity of his focus. Yet despite all this skill, there was no arrogance in his posture, no desire to impress anyone. He was simply playing, sharing a part of himself, and it was more powerful than any display of wealth or status could ever be. The room seemed to shrink around the music. The chandeliers and ornate decorations faded into the background, and all that mattered was the sound flowing from the piano. The wealthy girl felt a sense of calm she had never experienced in such a social setting. The janitor's music had a way of cutting through superficiality, reaching straight to the heart. It reminded her of something she had long forgotten: the value of simplicity, honesty, and genuine connection. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The janitor's hands moved gracefully over the keys, creating melodies that rose and fell with emotion. He shifted seamlessly between delicate, tender passages and bold, commanding chords, each one resonating deeply with the audience. The wealthy girl felt herself completely immersed, her mind and heart captivated by the music. She realized that this was more than a performance. It was a lesson in humility and respect. And in seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary, as the final notes approached, the room held its breath. The janitor's fingers lingered over the keys, allowing the music to fade slowly, leaving a gentle silence in its wake. The wealthy girl's eyes opened fully, and she looked at him with admiration and gratitude. "That was incredible," she said softly. "You've shown us something we will never forget. Thank you for sharing this with us." Her words were sincere, filled with appreciation and respect. The janitor gave a small, humble nod in response. He did not boast, he did not seek further recognition. His eyes, however, held a quiet warmth, a sense of satisfaction in knowing that his music had touched others. He returned to his cleaning quietly, yet the atmosphere in the room had changed forever. The wealthy girl continued to watch him, feeling a mix of humility and inspiration. She realized that true greatness was not about wealth or status, but about the passion and honesty one brought to their craft. The guests slowly began to clap, some still in disbelief, others with full appreciation. The wealthy girl's applause was the loudest, yet it was never meant to overshadow the music itself. It was an acknowledgement of the person behind the talent, the human being who had shared something beautiful without asking for anything in return. Even the skeptics could not deny the skill and emotion they had just witnessed. Some guests approached the janitor, asking questions and expressing their admiration. They wanted to know more about his life, his experiences, and how he had developed such talent. The janitor answered with quiet humility, never exaggerating or seeking attention. Each answer only increased the respect that everyone felt for him. The wealthy girl listened silently, realizing that this man's life had been shaped by discipline, patience, and resilience. She admired not just his skill, but the character he displayed in sharing it so selflessly. The evening continued, but the energy of the room had shifted. What had begun as a typical gathering of wealthy guests had transformed into something more meaningful. People spoke with newfound respect, sharing thoughts about the music, the talent, and the humility they had witnessed. The wealthy girl reflected on her own behavior, recognizing moments when she had judged others too quickly or allowed appearances to cloud her perception. She resolved to carry the lessons of this evening forward. Inspired by the janitor's example, the janitor continued his work quietly, moving through the hall with care and diligence. Yet the room seemed different now. The respect and admiration he had earned were palpable, though he remained humble, never allowing it to change the way he carried himself. The wealthy girl watched him for a moment longer, feeling gratitude and inspiration in equal measure. She knew that this evening and this music had created a memory that would stay with her and everyone else forever. The room had grown quieter as the evening progressed. Guests were still murmuring about the music they had heard, their conversations now laced with admiration and a sense of awe. The wealthy girl stood near the piano, her eyes following the janitor as he continued his work, moving quietly but with a sense of calm pride. Everyone had already witnessed his extraordinary talent, yet there was something about him that remained quietly powerful, a humble dignity. That made the impact of his music even greater. She felt a strange mix of emotions: curiosity, admiration, and something deeper, a desire to understand the person behind the music. The earlier astonishment had shifted into genuine respect, as she realized that the evening had become about far more than just entertainment. It had become a lesson in humility, character, and human connection. The janitor, who had long been overlooked and underestimated, had managed to change the perspective of everyone in the room, not through words or claims, but through his music and his quiet presence. The wealthy girl stepped closer to him, her voice soft and sincere. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you learn to play like this? How did you become so skilled?" Her question was genuine, without judgment or expectation. She wanted to know about his journey, the life experiences that had shaped him, and the effort behind the extraordinary talent she had witnessed. The janitor paused for a moment, looking at her with calm eyes. Then he spoke, his voice quiet yet steady. "I've loved music for as long as I can remember," he began. "I didn't have many opportunities and I never expected anyone to notice. I practiced whenever I could, often in silence, often when no one was watching. Music became my escape, my comfort, and my way of expressing what I couldn't say in words. It has always been a part of me." His words were simple, yet they carried a depth that touched everyone listening. The wealthy girl felt a lump in her throat, realizing that the skill she had just admired was built through years of dedication, discipline, and passion. It was not just talent, it was perseverance, a commitment to something he loved even when no one else recognized it. She felt a quiet admiration for the strength and humility that radiated from him. Some guests, who had been observing silently, began to murmur softly, expressing their astonishment. They could see that this was more than a performance. It was a reflection of a life lived with purpose, resilience, and dedication. The room seemed to be holding its breath, as if everyone understood that they were witnessing something rare and profound. The wealthy girl's eyes shone with emotion. "It's incredible," she said softly. "You've shown us something we could never have imagined. Your music. It's more than talent. It's honesty, courage, and beauty all at once." Her words were heartfelt, carrying genuine admiration without any trace of condescension. The janitor inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her words with quiet gratitude, though he did not seek praise. As the evening continued, the wealthy girl felt an urge to ensure that the significance of his performance was not lost. She turned to the guests and spoke, her voice clear and confident. "We have all witnessed something extraordinary tonight," she said. "This music, this talent, reminds us that greatness is not always visible on the surface. It is found in dedication, passion, and the courage to share what we love with the world." Her words had an impact. The room, previously filled with whispers of surprise and disbelief, grew quiet as everyone absorbed the message. Some guests looked at the janitor with renewed respect, while others reflected on their own assumptions and judgments. The wealthy girl had given voice to a truth that everyone had felt but few had articulated, that extraordinary talent can reside in unexpected places, and that humility and authenticity amplify its impact. The janitor returned to the piano one last time, drawn by the unspoken encouragement in her voice and the shared desire to experience music fully. He sat down and began to play a final piece, slower and more deliberate than before, almost meditative. The notes were soft, gentle, and full of emotion, telling a story of patience, resilience, and quiet triumph. The wealthy girl closed her eyes, letting herself be carried away by the melody, feeling as if the music was speaking directly to her heart. The guests, too, became fully absorbed in the performance. They could sense the depth of feeling behind each note, the years of dedication and struggle that had shaped the musician before them. Some sat silently, moved by the honesty of the music. Others whispered softly to themselves, marveling at the talent they had underestimated. Even the most skeptical guests could not deny the power of what they were witnessing. As the final notes lingered in the air, the room fell into a profound silence. It was not the awkward silence that often followed performances, but a stillness filled with reverence and contemplation. Every person in the hall felt the weight of the moment, the realization that they had been privileged to witness something truly rare. The janitor slowly lifted his hands from the keys, his expression calm but quietly satisfied. The wealthy girl opened her eyes and smiled warmly. She stepped closer and spoke softly. "Thank you. Not just for the music, but for showing us that talent, humility, and passion can change the way we see the world." Her words carried more than gratitude. They carried understanding, recognition, and respect. The janitor nodded, acknowledging her sentiment, and a subtle, unspoken connection passed between them, a shared understanding of what had just transpired. The guests began to applaud, some hesitantly at first, then more confidently as they realized the importance of the moment. Their applause was not just for the music, but for the courage and authenticity of the person who had shared it. The wealthy girl's applause was the most heartfelt, her admiration evident in every movement. She knew this was a night that would remain etched in her memory forever. Some guests approached the janitor afterward, asking more about his background, his experiences, and how he had cultivated such remarkable skill. He answered with humility, never boasting, never exaggerating. Each response only deepened the respect people felt for him. The wealthy girl listened quietly, smiling, realizing that true greatness often resides in places society tends to overlook, and that genuine talent paired with humility can inspire far more than wealth or status ever could. The room slowly began to settle. Conversations resumed, but they were different now, full of reflection, admiration, and a quiet sense of awe. The wealthy girl continued to watch the janitor work, noticing the calm dignity in his movements. She felt inspired, recognizing that this evening had not only revealed extraordinary talent but had also provided a powerful lesson in human connection, humility, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly are. Before the evening came to a close, the wealthy girl approached him one final time. "You've changed this night for all of us," she said sincerely. "Not just with your music, but with who you are. I hope you know that your talent and your character have left a mark on everyone here." Her words were simple, yet filled with depth and meaning. The janitor smiled softly, humbled but quietly proud. As he returned to his duties one last time, the guests reflected on the evening. They had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a performance, but a demonstration of resilience, humility, and authenticity. The wealthy girl realized that she had been reminded of what truly matters in life: kindness, honesty, and the courage to share one's gifts with the world. Regardless of recognition or status, the janitor's music had transformed the room, shifted perspectives, and created a memory that would last a lifetime. The wealthy girl stood quietly, looking at him with admiration, realizing that some of the most powerful moments in life come from unexpected places and people. She understood that true greatness is not defined by wealth or social standing, but by dedication, passion, and the ability to touch others' hearts. The evening ended with a sense of fulfillment and quiet reflection. Guests left with a renewed appreciation for talent, humility, and authenticity. The wealthy girl remained by the piano for a moment longer, her mind and heart full of gratitude for the music she had heard and the lessons she had learned. The janitor continued his work with calm efficiency, yet the respect, admiration, and inspiration he had inspired lingered in the room long after the night had ended. And so, the story concluded with a powerful reminder: greatness can be found in the most unexpected people. Talent and humility can leave a lasting impact, and a single act of honesty and passion can transform perceptions, bridge gaps, and create unforgettable memories. The janitor had shown everyone that true brilliance is often quiet, unassuming, and deeply human, and the wealthy girl had learned to see the extraordinary in the ordinary.